There's a particular shame that comes from singing out of tune, or being told you've been singing out of tune, or just hearing yourself sound bad. And it's the kind of shame that can make you not want to sing out at all because you don't want other people to hear you. And it can prevent you from joining a chorus, auditioning for something, or probably even more importantly, getting help. Because if you sing out of tune and then you go to a voice lesson and the voice teacher hears you sing out of tune, well, then they might tell you that you really shouldn't be singing. And you don't want to hear that because you really love singing. This is a real fear. This is a real thing. I've made a video training with some really simple exercises that will help you sound better. You can do them on your own. You can do them when nobody else is home to hear you. Not all of them even require you to make a lot of noise. But if you do them, if you make a habit of them, if you make a practice of doing them, you will improve the sound of your voice and you will improve your tunefulness. Because honestly, most singing out of tune comes from bad technique, not because there's something wrong with your brain, you have no talent, God spites you, none of that. Most of singing out of tune is just about how you're using your body. And so I give you exercises you can do in the privacy of your own home and see how they feel, see how they work, and reach out to me and let me know. To get to those exercises, visit my website, mvmusique.com. Right on the homepage, there's a box where you can input your email and I'll send them right to you. Your voice is unique to you. It grows as you grow. It changes as you change. If you're curious about the relationship between your voice and your body, your heart and your mind, welcome. My name is Michèle Voillequé, and I can't wait to hear you. Today, I'm offering you an interview with my friend Matthew Brown. He and I recorded an interview a few episodes ago about his spiritual practice of singing the Psalms, how he happened upon it, how it works for him, what it's meant for him. I'll put a link to that episode in the show notes. And as we were recording that episode, Matthew said he thought it would only be fair if he got to interview me in return. So that's what you're hearing today, is sort of a tables turned on Michèle. Matthew and I both work with voices. He is a speech language pathologist, or as he would say, a speech therapist, who works with folks who've had a traumatic brain injury. Right now, he's working with people who are recovering from concussion, mostly. So he has a very different perspective on the voice, or is working at it at a very different angle than I am. Whereas I'm working with folks who sound pretty good and want to sound better, or at least their mechanism is working, right? They can make sounds at all, and they can think of things to say, and that isn't the case for all of Matthew's clients. So I hope you'll enjoy this conversation, this geeking out about voices with Matthew and Michèle.
Blast off.
Hi, Matthew. Okay. What did you want to ask me, Matthew? You had questions.
I do have questions. I think that my number one job description is helping people engage with change. And usually that I expect that to be a painful experience because, the people I see didn't want this change at all.
Can you, for the benefit of people who don't know you as well as I, what are you talking about?
Oh, I guess I could introduce myself. We could start there. So, I'm a speech therapist, which is not what it sounds like, but I work with people with concussion and mild TBI to help them with cognitive rehabilitation after their injuries. So I've worked in brain injury for a long time, but mostly in the hospital setting with pretty severe brain injury and stroke. But in the last year, have changed to an outpatient clinic where I see mild brain injury and concussion. So usually when I see folks, I'm helping them with their complaints about memory or trouble focusing, sometimes with communication too, things like word finding trouble, that kind of thing.
So people are in your clinic because they had a car accident or a stroke and they're not the same as they were before.
Yeah, exactly. And they're seeking help. So they're bothered by, some symptoms that they're having, either with their cognition, communication, or both. So I always think that my job with them is to help people engage with change. But this is change that they didn't want, didn't ask for. It hit them sideways, sometimes literally. And that's typically a painful experience, right? To go through change that you hadn't planned on. And
Yeah.
here I am, and they come in thinking, oh, speech therapy is going to fix me. And I have to sell them on this idea that part of the healing process is going through more change.
It's not just a change back to how they were before.
Correct. It's a
It's like,
change to something different. And oftentimes many changes because they continue to heal. And so how they adapt or compensate for their injury also changes. And so they come kind of thinking, oh, you're going to fix me. And I have to sell them on this idea of, well, part of the path to better is changing what you do, changing a habit, using a different strategy, doing things differently than you've done them before. And that's really painful for people because there's that fear of failure, and sometimes their identity is wrapped up in how they did things before. And so asking them to change the way they do things feels like a loss on top of a loss they've already had.
and depending on what they do for a living, they're not learning all the time anyway. Like just the act of learning something new is new.
Yeah.
People have been on
Yeah.
autopilot,
Oh, yeah.
happily on
So,
autopilot.
yeah. So, my question is, since you also help people engage with change, right? But
Yeah.
they're, seeking change with you, does it often also turn into a painful experience?
I feel like my students, some of them are like a lot of people, like all of us. We want everything to be better, but we don't want anything to be different, you know?
Yeah.
So kind of the same as the people you see. I mean, like it's a variety, right, of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There is a certain amount of disbelief that they will have to do something differently to get a different result.
Hmm.
I mean, intellectually, a human may know if I want to make a stronger sound, I'm going to need to engage my body differently. For example, letting my
Mm-hmm.
mouth be more open.
Mm-hmm.
But then I ask them to try having their mouth more open, and it is not fun for them. It's all kinds of scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's all kinds of, I look like a dork. I don't want anybody to see me like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, a lot of identity based pain, you might say, like who
Mm-hmm.
we imagine ourselves to be. I'm a totally different person if I let my jaw be looser and I let my mouth open more when I talk or sing. This is mostly about singers. But just about everybody could benefit from having less jaw tension when they speak. But if I let myself do that, then I start to feel like I sound like somebody else. And you do it first. But that almost uniformly, that person has a lower IQ if it's about talking with a looser jaw.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's about singing with a more open mouth, people, another thing, it's less, well, it's partly I look like a dork. But there's also, I look like I'm trying to be fancy. I look like I'm trying to be special by acting like a singer. And unfortunately, there is a correlation between acting like a singer and sounding good when you sing. Like but that acting like a singer is some other persona that people aren't comfortable with. At which point I try to find YouTube videos of people that they like and turn the sound off so that they can see that the singers that they admire open their mouths when they sing. And when we turn the sound off, we can see that most of the time their mouth is way more open than would be considered polite at a dinner table.
Mm-hmm.
And like that happens. But it's the kind of thing that you can't see until you take the sound away and see the behavior separate from it. But yeah, I would say that's painful. I try to make it as fun as possible, but it is asking a person to have a new idea about who they could be, to accept a potential version of themselves. And if you've been told over and over again that you can't sing or, stop showing off or whatever those things are, that can be a tough sell because there's a lot of negative programming that you're coming up with. But most of the time, you didn't call me if you weren't at least kind of interested. So there are parts of the self that are fighting.
Mm-hmm.
They want to and they don't.
So you make it playful. That makes it less painful.
Yeah, I think you do that too. Or do you just go practical?
I play sometimes, but I think that it's more practical with speech therapy, like trying to kind of problem solve real world situations.
Showing them how it's useful in a specific instance in their life. Like, this is not fun, but if we do this other thing will go so much better.
Yeah. I think some of the hardest things I have to ask people to do is to slow down. So when you have someone who's had, a head injury and they feel slower, right? Like they feel like things are taking longer and they feel behind. Like sometimes it's happening right now because I have students going to finals and they feel behind. And here I come along telling them that they need to slow down more, that the answer to feeling behind is not to go faster. So that's really scary. When you feel behind, you don't want to slow down. And so most of the folks I have are used to kind of rushing through things or being really busy. And pacing themselves is really scary because they might fall further behind, right?
And is it the case that their lives were already crazy busy before the accident or before the incident that landed them with a concussion?
I would say that's true of many of my people. That's just kind of their habit of being really busy. And that may have been serving them or not serving them before their injury, but after their injury, it's just not livable anymore. I think the other thing that's kind of scary about slowing down is not just that you might fall further behind, but people want to know is like, do I have to slow down forever? Am I ever going to be able to speed up again? And they also get scared of their mind speeding up with a bunch of thoughts that they didn't want to deal with.
Oh, say more about that.
It's kind of like if you slow down, you might have to confront some of those worries that you've had lingering.
Oh, no.
And that if you're less busy, like your mind might wander to things that are just not as comfortable. Anyway, it makes me wonder about like with teaching singing, how much those like internal distractions get in the way. Because I find it happens a lot with what I do. How much does it happen with what you do?
Oh, let me count the ways. Well, my own voice teacher has said, Michèle, this would be so much easier for you if you just didn't think so much. If you were just a little dumber, just a little dimmer. I think that comes from making sound and being really attentive to how this is feeling in my body as I'm doing it. And so I'm trying to keep track of the sensations and also the music and figuring out how is this different from last time, like doing all of this other work. And my teacher sees me doing all that other work and, he's finally given up. He's finally accepted that this is just who I am and this is just how it goes. But in the beginning of our relationship, our teaching learning relationship, he would try very hard to just sing, just make the sound. And that didn't work. I mean, I could try, but I couldn't turn that analytical part of my brain off. And I find with teaching singing to other people, there are so many things that you can try to change to make a better sound. You can't change all the things at once. But in the course of a lesson, giving people several options, attacking a problem from several different angles, very often the student will get stuck because they decide they should try to apply all of those at once, that they would be a really good student if they could do all four things, like letting their jaw be loose, looking for the sound to vibrate something in the front of their face, maintaining an open throat, and when they take a breath that's deep and low into the belly. So we'll spend a little bit of time on each of those things, but often a newer student will immediately start to try to stack them. Think, oh, this is scaffolding me to a better place. Of course, all of those things will build on each other and you'll get to a better tone. But in the moment, in the lesson, they're just different angles of attack on a particular problem. They're different things to think about. And my expectation isn't that you think about all of them at the same time. And my expectation isn't that you leave the lesson making a perfect, in air quotes, sound, or that we, in air quotes, succeed. I mean, we succeed at lots of little things, but like that there's some kind of ta-da, like great success thing. Probably not, which is not to say that every lesson is a failure. That sounds terrible. But that I think it's the being out of the habit of learning and feeling like results need to happen immediately, or all the results have to happen immediately. I guess that's the biggest thought that gets in people's way that I see is that all the results have to happen immediately. And then just whatever inner critic garbage they inherited from their family. Like nobody in their family's not musical. Nobody in their family is musical, so therefore they're not musical. Their love interest 20 years ago told them, please, if you love me, don't sing near me. And that person isn't even in their life anymore. But they're carrying that, whatever. Or they were in middle school chorus and their voice started to change, and this was super duper typical as recently as 20 years ago, to tell boys when their voice started to change, come back when you're finished, and wouldn't tolerate having a changing voice in a chorus because it was undependable. You never knew what was going to come out. And they didn't like that. They wanted to have a nice presentation for the parents and the school administration. And so you just, kick the boys out whose voices are changing. And what do you know? They don't come back when you do that. The best thing you can do for your voice when it's changing is to sing with it. Like to just keep working it. Just keep giving those muscles a chance to do something productive. And they'll figure themselves out. But it can sound really terrible. Terrible. What's that mean? It sounds like a voice that's changing. And we have, for thousands of years, decided we don't like that sound. A lot of people have come for lessons knowing that if they work on their singing voice, that it would help them be more confident in other parts of their life. Not necessarily with speaking, but just confident generally. Like if I thought about myself, I can sing a song well, that would return to them some core identity, some core ego strength that they feel that they lost at some point when they became, late element, whatever, puberty, extremely self-conscious. And they rightly think that if they can get that skill back, if they can get back to that they would feel more comfortable in their own skin now, even if it's like they're 35, 45, 55 years old.
So I've not worked in voice therapy much, but a lot of speech therapists do. And so curious if you've had either students who've come to you after getting voice therapy with a speech therapist, or who you felt like you wanted to send for voice therapy because you felt like there was something more medical going on.
The people that I wanted to send to voice therapy were already had an appointment or had already seen somebody for voice therapy. That so far has conveniently lined up. For most of them, I'm trying to think if there's an exception. None of them had anything that they could get their insurance to sign off on more than 10 visits for. So, and the 2 or 3 people that I'm working with now who had gone for voice therapy at one point and they ran out of visits, their voice therapist said, the best thing that you can do is to keep taking singing lessons. From what you've told me about your singing teacher, she knows what she's doing. The exercises that I'm giving you are the same exercises that she's giving you. Like we're on the same page. Just keep doing that, which feels really good to hear. And it's kind of like pretty terrible of the insurance companies that you can still be in a place where you're dissatisfied with your vocal production. You could still benefit from therapy, but the insurance company won't pay for it because you've achieved some baseline functionality. I don't know, maybe you can explain more how that works, or maybe you don't want to. Maybe that's... But I mean, I'm sure that your people, I think you've told me that your people run out of visits before they feel like they're healed, or before they're ready to stop seeing you. And not just because you're lovely and they want to see you every week because you're a nice guy. Like, you're a pleasant person to have in one's life. Can you talk about about that? Like, who decides when we're healed? Air quotes again.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I won't venture to say why some things are covered by insurance and others aren't. That's honestly mysterious to me as a clinical provider, like what can get approved and what doesn't get approved. But I think by and large, right, the time that I have with clients is too short. It's too short for them to feel like all of their goals are met. It's too short for them to feel like their recovery is as far along as they want it to be. So I have to kind of, prepare them for that early, I think, when they see me, that healing won't be done when you discharge, right? That we can set the groundwork for healing, the strategies that will help carry you forward, ways to monitor yourself, right? Those things we can definitely do in the time we have. But healing won't be done in the time that we have, especially with what we know with like neuroplasticity of the brain, right? It takes a long time, and it doesn't stop even after the time it takes, because your brain never stops changing your whole life. It's always in a constant state of change. And so even long after an injury, healing can still be happening because change can still be happening. Since you sometimes get people from voice therapists who are limited in the number of visits they have, right? Maybe can only see them for, 6, 8, 10 visits or something like that. Is there something that you wish they knew, like the voice therapist knew, from your perspective as kind of like the one who works with people maybe longer term?
Well, I'd love to have a conversation with with a voice therapist, actually, about this. I feel like how the patient understands their vocal quality, and maybe like more broadly, their quality of life.
Mm.
Like what level of functioning are they used to? And I think they can kind of infer that, because I feel like the otolaryngologists and the voice therapists, just, is there anything pathological going on?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything growing down there that we need to do something about? And if the answer is no, then they're kind of like, you're fine. But people aren't fine. I think it's not a binary, the fine, not fine. I think it's more complicated than that. And they may be well aware of that, but they're confined by what insurance companies allow for. The other thing that I would say that I wish everybody understood, and this is kind of like going to the gym. You can't buy a gym membership and then expect your body to change. You actually have to go and use the machines or go to a class or whatever. You have to do it so that, the instrument changes as it's used. And I think maybe the voice therapist could do a better job of explaining how the thing really works in a way that people really get it. And maybe that's too much to ask in the amount of time that they have, because the thing is really complicated and you can't see it and it's really kind of gross. I mean, there's, it's very weird to look at, a model or a cadaver, in my case, as I've got to see a cadaver and the vocal folds and all of that. Actually, that was more helpful than the model in a way, because it's a whole person. But it's, not everybody gets to go to a morgue and I want to see how my vocal folds work. Like, that's not a thing. There's a business idea. Because I think people too rigidly connect their voice to their brain. And they think that if they're having a problem with their voice, it's because there's something wrong with their brain. And that somehow all of this musculature is totally out of their control. I think we could all be doing a better job at clarifying that, of helping people physically experience that this is something that they have control over, or that this is, they know their body, they can know their body better than they think they can. And your brain is helping you make choices. If I decide to talk down here, like this is a choice that my brain is making right now, to just speak to you in vocal fry and sounding like I'm really, like, that's an option. Like, and everything is really collapsed, and this is where I could be. But like, if this is part of the problem, that this is how somebody's talking, because it just hasn't occurred to them to sit up a little straighter and to have a little bit more space in their mouth, and like to do it a little different. I feel like that's something that you can really only learn about by being corrected in the moment, because this is so normal for so many people, and they think they have a voice disorder when they don't. They're just like, this is a usage problem. And this is when the otolaryngologist says there's nothing pathological going on, and the person says, well, why do I sound like this then? I was like, well, okay, let me help you with that. But which is not to say that that's the only kind of thing that sends people to voice therapy. Like, there's all kinds of just like extra tension, in the body can cause problems. Lots of things can get you sent to voice therapy. I just saw that Bon Jovi was talking to Terry Gross about having been to voice therapy, and just like in the last couple of years or something. And I'm like, only now? Man, you kind of sounded like you needed voice therapy, in 1989. But anyway, he went, and he was reporting back that it's taking more effort than he thought it would, and progress is slow, but he is making progress, and he really wants to tour with the band at their 40-year anniversary, and they're going to do that, and we're just going to make it work. We're just going to keep doing our work, and so it's a really hopeful message ultimately from him. What is your number one technique for helping people? What do people most need from you, do you think?
They most need to learn how to pace themselves, how to slow down, not to the point of stopping, right? Not to the point of like, I'm going to hide in a dark room and sleep all day and not go outside where it's noisy, right? Not that kind of slowing down. That kind of slowing down is not helpful for concussion, despite myths to the contrary. But slowing down their pace enough that their brain can catch up with what they're doing, taking short, frequent breaks, and finding ways to calm their nervous system so that they can be intentional instead of reactive to what's going on. You talked about tension in the body with voice, but I see it all the time with my folks working on cognition. I can think of more than one client I've given a little, working memory exercise to them. And, they think that the exercise is there because they're going to drill their working memory. And that's part of it. But the more important lesson of the exercise is how to keep your body calm when you're doing something hard. Because what often happens is I'll give this exercise to people and I'll see their shoulders creep up. I'll see their jaw clenching. I'll see them holding their breath or clenching their fists or any number of things that show me that their body's reacting to this exercise like they're seeing a grizzly bear, And it's not a grizzly bear, right? It's just like I'm flipping some cards over and I'm asking you to remember what you saw 2 cards ago. This is low stakes, right?
Yeah.
But something in their body's reacting to it like it's a really serious threat. And so the point of the exercise is, yeah, it's good to try to, stay focused and remember what you saw. But more important is, can you stay calm in front of a perceived challenge?
Yeah.
So yeah, pacing and finding ways to calm your nervous system. That's like the number one thing I think people with concussion need.
The analog to singing, I think, would be I spend a lot of time teaching people how to only use the part of their body that they need to be using. I see lots of people do extra things to support the sound that they're making. Like their shoulders will get really tense. That's a great one. Or they're trying to figure out what the notes are and their jaw will get tighter. When they're not sure of the pitch, their mouth gets smaller and their jaw gets tighter. And that's the best way to sing out of tune, even if you know what the notes are. So it doesn't help. And yeah, to keep the nervous system calm, even if it's just me, right? But I'm a judging other, for some people's brains, right? But for the students who want to perform, keeping your nervous system calm, because you might embarrass yourself. And then, but if you go down that road of freak out, you're not going to sing as well as you could. You can be a certain distance down the road of freak out and still perform well, but there is a tipping point. And if you can not take that path at all, that's ideal.
What's the number one thing people need from you?
I think permission to learn. Permission to try and try and try and try and to like get progressively better. That's why where I see people need the most soothing is that it's okay to suck. It's okay to not know how to do something. And that if disappointing singing were going to injure my home, the home would have fallen down years ago. The house would not be standing just by my own efforts of disappointing singing. Like I would have brought this house down all by myself. And that practice makes better. That's what I say this week. I'd probably say it next week too. Is there anything like parting words or anything you want to... What do you wish we knew about speech therapy? About concussion? About change? Ha! You get the final word. What do you wish we all knew about change?
Oh, what do I wish we all knew about change? Changing what you do doesn't mean losing who you are. And that you can be kind to yourself during that process and give yourself a lot of grace.
There's more to you than you thought possible.
More to you than just the way you've been doing things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the number one for me.
Yeah. I think that's really helpful. Well, thank you.
Thank you. It's been a treat. Bye.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Every positive review helps new people find the show. Subscribing ensures you'll learn about new episodes as soon as they come out. If you have a question about singing or speaking or being, please send me an email at letters@mvmusique.com. That's letters at M as in Mary, V as in Victor, MUSIK.com. Transcripts and show notes are available on my website. You can subscribe to my newsletter there too. Can't Wait to Hear You is produced in conjunction with Particulate Media. I'm your host, Michèle Voillequé. I can't wait to hear you.